Hello everyone, welcome back to One Voice, One Night. Today we embark on an exciting adventure called Whispers of Middle-earth. Whatever you are doing, take a moment to relax, listen, and get ready for the adventure. The wind was soft tonight, rustling through the leaves, like a lullaby hummed by the trees themselves. You stepped inside the little cabin, where the fire had already been lit and the air smelled faintly of pine wood and something sweet, like old pipe smoke and warm honey bread. The chair waiting for you near the hearth was worn in just the right way, shaped by quiet moments and long evenings spent listening. You didn't need to speak. The old storyteller was already smiling, his eyes warm with memory, as if he'd been expecting you all along. "Come closer to the fire," he said, his voice a slow whisper, as gentle as the crackling flames. "You've walked far, haven't you? The road outside is long, but here we rest. And while we rest, I'll tell you what once was. I'll tell you about the Shire." He leaned back in his old wooden chair, a cup of tea cupped between his hands, steam curling toward the ceiling like a drifting dream. The firelight danced across the old map pinned above the mantel, a map of lands both familiar and forgotten. And then, in that soft room, with the wind singing outside and the logs popping low and slow, he began. Far in the northwest of the world, past the rivers and the tall hills, past even the worry of kings and the echoes of wars, lies a small green land called the Shire. It's not a place you'll find on most maps, and if you do, it'll be tucked into the corner, with hardly a mark or warning. But that is the Shire's way, quiet, humble, untouched. The Shire is a land of rolling hills and patchwork fields. Apple trees sway along stone fences. Footpaths wind lazily through clover and buttercups. The streams are slow, the skies are kind, and the grass is thick and soft beneath bare feet. For the people of the Shire, the hobbits, wear no shoes. Their feet are tough and wide, and they walk the earth like they belong to it, like it welcomes them home. You might see them in the early morning, hobbits, stepping out of their round green doors to greet the day. There's always a smell of fresh bread and warm bacon in the air. They rise not with urgency, but with comfort, because a good day starts with first breakfast, and second breakfast, and then a bit of elevenses, if the mood suits, and it usually does. They garden, they sing, they smoke their pipes beneath trees older than time and trade stories that may or may not be true, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the telling of it, the sharing, the laughter that follows. And though they are small, perhaps half the height of men, there is nothing small about their hearts. They are stubborn in the best of ways, loyal beyond question, and brave. Braver than most would ever guess. There was one hole in the hillside, not unlike the others, with a perfectly round door painted green, and a shining brass knob in the centre. It belonged to Bilbo Baggins of Bag End, a hobbit who once disappeared for a year and returned with tales of dragons and gold. The neighbours said he had gone mad, but sometimes, late at night, when the moon was full and the ale was strong, they would whisper of the fire in his eyes and wonder what he had truly seen. Bilbo grew old and passed on his home to his younger cousin Frodo. And Frodo, quiet and thoughtful, would one day carry a weight far heavier than any hobbit should. But that is not where we are tonight. Tonight we rest in the Shire. We imagine the warmth of the kitchen, where the fire never dies and the pantry is always full. We hear the laughter drifting across the fields from a birthday party in full swing, lanterns hanging from tree branches, music floating over tables stacked with cakes and pies. We picture the gaffer pulling up carrots, the cotton children chasing fireflies, and Samwise Gamgee staring up at the stars with quiet wonder, never knowing that one day the stars would shine for him. Because even in the smallest places, stories begin, and even the smallest person can carry the greatest burden. The Shire is where hope lives. It is the reason so many others fought and fell, so that this little piece of the world could stay green and safe and sleepy, so that someone, somewhere, could still wake up to the smell of eggs and toast and know nothing of orcs or war. You shift a little in your chair, the blanket drawn closer around your shoulders. The fire crackles again, soft and low, like the earth itself breathing. The storyteller sips his tea and smiles at you. We begin here, because it reminds us what's worth saving. But the road does not end in the Shire. He leans forward, and his voice drops to a hush. There are halls of stone where kings once ruled. There are mountains that remember dragons. There are forests that speak and seas that mourn. And I will tell you about them all. You feel your breath slow. Your eyes begin to close. His voice grows fainter, not because it is fading, but because it is leading you deeper, not into sleep, but into dream. Rest now, he says as the fire burns low, casting shadows that look almost like memories. When you wake, we will visit the dwarves, and you will hear the song of the mountain. And in the hush that follows, you drift into a sleep woven with pipe smoke and green hills, into Middle-earth. The fire still glowed when you opened your eyes again, though the night had deepened and the wind outside had grown quieter. More distant, like it too, had settled in to listen. The storyteller hadn't moved. He sat in the same chair, as if time here ran slower, or perhaps not at all. His cup of tea was warm again, though you hadn't seen him refill it. He met your eyes with a small, knowing nod. "I told you," he whispered. "When you woke, we would go beneath the mountain." He reached into the pouch by his side and pulled something small and heavy, a stone, smooth and black, with veins of gold running through it like frozen lightning. He turned it in his palm slowly, reverently. This came from the lonely mountain. Erebor, the dwarves called it. It was a place of echo and fire, of pride and silence, and long ago I walked its halls. He placed the stone beside the fire and closed his eyes for a moment, as if reaching back. And when he spoke again, his voice was slower, deeper, as though it carried the weight of stone and time. Imagine the mountain, tall, cold, and sharp against the grey sky. Snow clings to its peak like a crown. Wind howls along its ridges, but inside it is warm. Inside it is alive. The dwarves built cities beneath stone, not just caves or tunnels, but halls, vast and vaulted, with pillars carved from the bones of the mountain itself. The air was filled with the ringing of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, and the low thrum of song. They sang not with flutes or harps, but with voices like gravel and thunder. Songs about kings and ancestors, about fire and gold, about secrets lost and reclaimed. When dwarves sing, the stone listens, and it remembers. Erebor was their jewel, the greatest of the dwarf cities. It stood near the edge of the Wilderland, beyond the forest of Mirkwood, and it was said that its gates shone like the morning sun when opened. The great door faced east, carved into the mountainside, flanked by statues of long-bearded kings. Within, the halls were lit by lanterns set in crystal, and the floors were smooth from centuries of boots and bare feet. Forges glowed day and night. Jewels were cut. Swords were forged. Armor was shaped, not for display, but for the pride of creation. For dwarves, craft is sacred. To shape the unyielding, to give form to the stubborn, is to honor the stone itself. But with wealth always comes attention. And one day, something ancient stirred. He came on wings like storms and fire in his breath. Smaug, the golden, a dragon of terrible mind and hunger. He smelled the gold from leagues away, and when he came with fury. The mountain shuddered under his roar. The sky turned red. Dwarves fled. Many fell. Erebor in one day was lost. The dragon made it his home. He curled atop the treasure hoard, sleeping for years, then decades, then longer, dreaming in gold. No dwarf dared return. Not then. Not until a little company, long after, dared to climb the mountain again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what it meant to lose a home like that. Dwarves are not like men or elves. They do not build to expand or to conquer. They build to belong. The mountain is not merely shelter, it is kin. To lose Erebor was not just to lose a kingdom, but to lose a heart, a lineage, a song. They wandered after that, the dwarves. Some settled, some faded. But deep down, in every forge, in every stone turned beneath the earth, they remembered, and they waited. The fire flickered low, casting shadows against the storyteller's face like the edges of a memory. He leaned forward and added another log, with careful hands, like he was feeding not just the fire, but the story itself. There is a song, he said quietly, that Thorin Oakenshield once sang, before he reclaimed the mountain. Would you like to hear a piece of it? You nodded, though your eyes were already heavy again. He closed his eyes and sang just a few bars, his voice no longer the soft whisper of before, but a hum from the deep, like stone grinding gently, like an old forge sparking back to life. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The song drifted through the cabin like smoke, like dreams. You could almost hear the clink of coins, the low chant of dwarves, the creak of leather boots on stone. And then his voice faded, and the fire settled again into stillness. They were proud, the dwarves, fierce and loyal, not always wise, but always steadfast. When the mountain called, they answered. He leaned back, eyes now far away, as if looking through you into time itself. Next, perhaps, we'll walk under different trees, not stone ones, but silver-leaved, in a valley where stars are remembered. You felt yourself slipping again, gently this time. The mountain faded, the songs grew quiet, and somewhere far away, a forest waited, full of light and voices that would never die. Sleep took you, cradled in memory and firelight. The wind had changed. It no longer whispered through pine branches or curled along grassy hills. It came now in sudden gusts, dry and sharp, like it had passed over scorched earth and blackened stone. You didn't feel cold, but the warmth from the fire seemed smaller, quieter, as if it too was holding its breath. The storyteller stirred, his face half lit by flame, the rest swallowed in shadow. For a long moment, he said nothing. He only watched the fire, watched as it reached toward the dark corners of the room and then fell back, like it too remembered something. Then, finally, he spoke. "Some things," he said softly, "do not grow old the way we do. Some things sleep, and while they sleep, the world forgets to fear them." He touched the stone beside him, the same one from the mountain, and you noticed now that it had grown warm, or perhaps your hand had grown colder. "Tonight, I will tell you about fire. Not the fire in your hearth, the fire that breathes, the fire that hungers." And with that, he began to speak of dragons. In the beginning, they were few. The oldest stories say that they were made in mockery, that something dark and hateful shaped them not with love, but with envy. They were not meant to build or sing or wander. They were made to destroy, and they did it beautifully. Dragons came like storms. They swept across mountains and meadows, their wings blotting out the sun, their bellies glowing like furnaces. Fire poured from their mouths, not like a breath, but like a flood. Castles melted, forests turned to ash, and those who stood against them burned. But they did not destroy for joy, they destroyed for treasure. Dragons love gold, not to spend, not to use, to lie upon, to sleep in, to hoard and bury themselves beneath, like a child curling beneath blankets. The richer the hoard, the deeper the dragon's slumber. It is said they can hear a single coin move, even in dreams. The greatest of them in the later days was called Smaug. He came from the north, black and red, long and terrible. His wings stretched wider than the halls of kings. His teeth could tear stone, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, they saw everything, not just your face, but your fears, your weakness, your greed. When he came upon the lonely mountain, he did not knock, he roared, and the world shook. The dwarves could not stop him. The gates broke, the halls filled with fire and screaming. He flew through the gold like a swimmer through water, flinging it high, laughing in a voice deeper than thunder. And then, when all were gone, when the mountain lay empty and still, he slept. For years, for decades, he curled atop the hoard, a mountain within the mountain, and the gold grew cold beneath him. His breath warmed the stones. The jewels lost their light. But still, he slept. Outside, the world moved on. The mountain became a haunted place, its name spoken only in fear. Men built cities far away. The dwarves wandered. Elves watched from afar. And Smaug dreamed. They say he would twitch in his sleep, wings flexing, claws curling, as if even in his slumber he remembered flame. But dragons do not sleep forever. One day the mountain was disturbed. A company returned, small, foolish, brave, led by Thorin, seeking not just treasure, but a home and a burglar, a hobbit. But that is another tale, and one I'll tell later. Tonight, I want you to understand something. Dragons are more than beasts. They are hunger given form. They are desire without end. And the greatest danger they bring is not their fire, but what they awaken in others. Men would kill for a single coin from Smaug's hoard. Dwarves would weep over a fallen gem. Even elves, in their long wisdom, feel their hearts beat faster at the sight of dragon gold. Smaug did not just steal a mountain. He corrupted it. He poisoned it with longing. The storyteller fell silent for a moment, letting the words settle like ashes. The fire had burned low again, flickering blue at the edges, and the wind outside now sounded distant and hollow, like it echoed through an empty valley. "There are still dragons," he whispered, "sleeping under the world. Some beneath mountains, some beneath the hearts of men." You didn't ask what he meant. You didn't need to. Instead, you closed your eyes and let his voice follow you into the dark. The next place I'll take you. It's quieter. Older. The trees sing there, and stars fall like snow. You felt yourself slipping, not falling, but drifting through smoke and stone, away from fire into something softer. Sleep caught you like gentle hands, and the dragon's breath faded behind. The night had grown deeper still, and though the fire in the hearth had faded to a soft glow, its warmth remained, like a memory that refused to leave. You stirred slightly, wrapped in your blanket, the scent of the wood smoke still lingering in your breath, and the storyteller, ever still, ever watching, leaned forward once more, as if sensing the moments you hovered between sleep and waking. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. You didn't answer, but your heart slowed. "It's not wind tonight. It's water, running over smooth stone. It's the sound of leaves falling into deep rivers. We've left the mountain now. And now we walk beneath the stars." He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to something you couldn't hear. And then he began. "There's a valley, hidden between tall peaks, where no road leads, unless it is chosen to. It lies beneath the shadows of ancient hills, wrapped in mist and melody. You will not find it on any map drawn by the hands of men, and even those who once walked its paths may struggle to return. It is called Imladris in the old tongue, but in the speech of men it is Rivendell. It is a place of refuge, not a city, not a fortress, but a sanctuary for weary feet, for heavy hearts, for those who have carried too much for too long. And for as long as memory goes back, it has been kept and guarded by Elrond, son of Eärendil, Lord of the Valley. The elves of Rivendell do not sing loud songs, nor boast of battles won. They sing of the sea, of stars, of sorrow. Their music floats like mist, slipping through the arches of marble and their open-air halls that let the starlight pass untouched. They remember. Elves do not die as men do. They fade, slowly, like morning mist. They do not forget. Every joy is carried with them, and so is every grief. That is their burden. That is their beauty. The halls of Rivendell are quiet. The floors are smooth stone, worn not by marching boots, but by soft-footed scholars and silent travellers. Here, tomes are kept that predate the rise of kingdoms. Maps drawn when the mountains were still being named. Songs written when the stars were younger. I once spent a season there. The storyteller's voice lowered, as though caught between reverence and nostalgia. It was winter when I arrived, though in Rivendell, winter is not harsh. The snow fell like feathers, and the waterfalls never froze. Fires burned in stone braziers, not for warmth, but for light. I remember the scent of cedar and parchment, the rustle of robes as elves passed by, never hurried, never lost. And Elrond. Ah, Elrond. He is not tall by the measure of kings, nor loud by the measure of lords. But when he speaks, the wind listens. He has eyes like old rivers, deep, patient, carved by time. He was there in battles most have forgotten. He was there when the world broke once before. And still, he remains. He told me stories I will never repeat, not because I was forbidden, but because they were too old, too heavy. You cannot tell the weight of centuries with words. Only silence can carry them. But there was one thing I can share. One night, while walking the eastern path beside the falls, I saw her. She was standing beneath a tree, its leaves silver blue in the moonlight. Her hair was dark as twilight, her hands folded, her gaze far beyond the valley. And though I dared not speak, I knew her name, Arwen, daughter of Elrond. Even then, she carried sorrow like a crown. She had not yet chosen her path, not yet chosen to love a mortal man. But the weight of choice was already in her eyes. That night, I understood what it meant to be elven. To live forever is not to laugh longer or dance more often. It is to feel everything, deeper, to carry joy and pain like threads woven into the same cloth. The storyteller was quiet now. His eyes were on the fire, but his mind was far away. Rivendell is not a place, he said softly. It's a moment, a breath between what was and what will be. And for some of us, it's the only peace we'll ever truly know. Outside, you thought you heard a faint chime, not of bells, but of water on stone, echoing from a place you'd never seen. The fire was low, your eyelids heavier. Rest, the voice said again, fading like a song at the edge of sleep. There are still kings to meet, and shadows to pass through, but not yet. You drifted off with moonlight on your face and elven songs in your ears, held in the arms of a valley that would never truly let you go. The fire had dimmed into soft red embers, no longer dancing, only glowing, like the heartbeat of something old and steady. Outside, the wind had stilled completely. The world beyond the walls seemed paused, holding its breath, wrapped in the hush that only the deepest part of the night could bring. You didn't speak, but the storyteller saw that you were still awake, barely, gently, drifting at the edge of sleep. He turned his head, his voice quieter than ever. Tonight, we speak of men, of those who stand between the light and the dark, often alone and often forgotten. He shifted slightly in his chair, as if settling in for something personal. Not all heroes wear crowns, and not all kings are born in palaces. He looked toward the fire, and the tale began. There is a man who walked the edges of the world unnoticed. His cloak was grey, his boots were worn. His name, when spoken, was not his own, for he had many names, and none he truly claimed. In the wild places of the north, he moved like a shadow, between trees and ruins, sleeping under the stars, watching roads others had forgotten. Where the danger crept quietly, in places too small for armies to care, he watched. He protected. They called him Strider, but that was not his name. He carried a sword, broken long ago, reforged not for war, but for what must come. In his blood ran the lines of kings, going back to a realm that had sunk beneath the sea. But he wore no crown, gave no orders. He waited, and he wandered. His name was Aragorn. He was born to a world that expected him to reclaim a destiny. But instead of taking it, he chose to earn it. Not by loud deeds or bright banners, but by silence, patience, and care. He learned the healing herbs of the forest, the songs of the old elves, the speech of birds and beasts. He walked beside Gandalf. He fought beside elves. He knelt beside the dying. And through it all, he asked for no reward. The storyteller's voice lingered a moment, as if in awe. He was the kind of man who knew the names of every soldier beneath him, who stood in the cold so others might sleep, who feared failure more than death. He paused, then smiled faintly. And he loved. Arwen. Evenings in Rivendell sometimes passed without words. She would walk beneath the stars, and he would follow, never speaking unless she wished it. Their love was not loud. It was quiet, unshakable, like roots beneath stone. And like all true loves, it carried a cost. For to choose him was to leave the undying lands behind, to be mortal, to know time would run short. But she chose him, as he had chosen his path, not to rule, but to serve. When the time came, when darkness rose again and the shadow spread from the east, Aragorn did not hesitate. He walked the paths of the dead, where no man had dared step for generations. He led armies, not because he craved victory, but because he believed others deserved to live. He faced Sauron's armies not with certainty, but with hope. And in the end, when peace came, and the world was ready to heal, they gave him a crown. He accepted it, but only because it meant he could build something worth protecting. He became king, but never stopped walking among the people. The storyteller leaned back, his eyes reflecting the last glow of the embers. "You see," he whispered, "the greatest strength of men is not in their weapons, but in their choice to keep going, even when they are afraid." Outside, a breeze stirred, gentle as breath. "There are many tales of men," he said, "of battles and bloodlines and broken oaths. But I chose this one because it reminds us what leadership can be. Quiet, steady, carried not in gold but in burden." The storyteller was quiet now. His eyes were on the fire, but his mind was far away. "Rivendell is not a place," he said softly. "It's a moment, a breath between what was and what will be. And for some of us, it's the only peace we'll ever truly know." Outside, you thought you heard a faint chime, not of bells, but of water on stone, echoing from a place you'd never seen. The fire was low, your eyelids heavier. "Rest," the voice said again, fading like a song at the edge of sleep. "There are still kings to meet, and shadows to pass through, but not yet." You drifted off with moonlight on your face and elven songs in your ears, held in the arms of a valley that would never truly let you go. The fire had dimmed into soft red embers, no longer dancing, only glowing, like the heartbeat of something old and steady. Outside, the wind had stilled completely. The world beyond the walls seemed paused, holding its breath, wrapped in the hush that only the deepest part of the night could bring. You didn't speak, but the storyteller saw that you were still awake, barely, gently, drifting at the edge of sleep. He turned his head, his voice quieter than ever. "Tonight, we speak of men, of those who stand between the light and the dark, often alone and often forgotten." He shifted slightly in his chair, as if settling in for something personal. "Not all heroes wear crowns, and not all kings are born in palaces." He looked toward the fire, and the tale began. "There is a man who walked the edges of the world unnoticed. His cloak was grey, his boots were worn. His name, when spoken, was not his own, for he had many names, and none he truly claimed. In the wild places of the north, he moved like a shadow, between trees and ruins, sleeping under the stars, watching roads others had forgotten. Where the danger crept quietly, in places too small for armies to care, he watched. He protected. They called him Strider, but that was not his name. He carried a sword, broken long ago, reforged not for war, but for what must come. In his blood ran the lines of kings, going back to a realm that had sunk beneath the sea. But he wore no crown, gave no orders. He waited, and he wandered. His name was Aragorn. He was born to a world that expected him to reclaim a destiny. But instead of taking it, he chose to earn it. Not by loud deeds or bright banners, but by silence, patience, and care. He learned the healing herbs of the forest, the songs of the old elves, the speech of birds and beasts. He walked beside Gandalf. He fought beside elves. He knelt beside the dying. And through it all, he asked for no reward. The storyteller's voice lingered a moment, as if in awe. He was the kind of man who knew the names of every soldier beneath him, who stood in the cold so others might sleep, who feared failure more than death. He paused, then smiled faintly. And he loved. Arwen. Evenings in Rivendell sometimes passed without words. She would walk beneath the stars, and he would follow, never speaking unless she wished it. Their love was not loud. It was quiet, unshakable, like roots beneath stone. And like all true loves, it carried a cost. For to choose him was to leave the undying lands behind, to be mortal, to know time would run short. But she chose him, as he had chosen his path, not to rule, but to serve. When the time came, when darkness rose again, and the shadow spread from the east, Aragorn did not hesitate. He walked the paths of the dead, where no man had dared step for generations. He led armies, not because he craved victory, but because he believed others deserved to live. He faced Sauron's armies, not with certainty, but with hope. And in the end, when peace came, and the world was ready to heal, they gave him a crown. He accepted it, but only because it meant he could build something worth protecting. He became king, but never stopped walking among the people. The storyteller leaned back, his eyes reflecting the last glow of the embers. "You see," he whispered, "the greatest strength of men is not in their weapons, but in their choice to keep going, even when they are afraid." Outside, a breeze stirred, gentle as breath. "There are many tales of men," he said, "of battles and bloodlines and broken oaths. But I chose this one because it reminds us what leadership can be. Quiet, steady, carried not in gold but in burden." You felt yourself sinking deeper, wrapped in the rhythm of the voice, the calm of the room, the weight of stories older than memory. "And tomorrow," he said softly, "I will tell you of a kingdom that fell beneath the waves, of pride, and of the warning it left behind. But tonight you slept, and in your dreams a ranger walked beside you, silent, tall, steady, guiding you through the dark toward the first light of morning. You awoke not with a jolt, but with a breath, slow and deep, as though your dreams had been oceans, and your body was returning to the surface. The fire in the hearth still glowed faintly, though now it was all embers, pulsing like the quiet rhythm of time itself. The storyteller hadn't moved, and yet something about him was different. His gaze no longer looked into the fire, it looked through it, as if beyond the flames was a memory too large to hold in words. "When men speak of power," he began softly, "they often mean kingdoms, crowns, and the reach of their hands. But power," he said, "real power, is time. And time was what they feared losing most." He closed his eyes for a long moment. "Let me tell you about Númenor. Far out in the western sea, past all the shores known to the maps of today, there was once an island, broad and beautiful, shaped like a star. It rose from the waves as a gift, a blessing to those few men who had remained faithful in an age of darkness. They were called the Edain, and their reward was Númenor, a land rich with green fields, white sands, and mountains that touched the sky. The sea wrapped around them like a mother's arms, and the stars above seemed closer, brighter. The people of Númenor were taller than other men, wiser, stronger, and their lives were long, far longer than those born in Middle-earth. They built towers that touched the clouds. They sailed in ships that never feared storm or tide. They charted the stars. They spoke with the elves who visited their shores. They learned and they prospered. For a time they were content. But time is never still. Even the longest lives must end. And as the years passed, the Númenóreans began to look westward, toward the undying lands, and wonder why they were not allowed to go there. They saw the elves come and go. They watched their own aging faces in the mirror, and slowly that most dangerous of seeds took root. Fear, not of pain, not of war, but of death. They had everything, and yet it was not enough. They wanted more years, then endless years, then immortality. And so began their fall. At first, they built ships meant only to reach farther east, to explore Middle-earth, to bring gifts. But in time, they brought swords instead of songs. Kings who once wore white robes began to wear armor, not for defense, but to conquer. They took land, built cities, and ruled with pride. And back on the island, fear turned to anger. Why should they die, they asked, when the elves lived on? Why were the undying lands forbidden? What was the point of greatness if it could all vanish? They turned away from the Vala, the stewards of the world, and began to build a temple to death itself. And when at last they were promised eternal life by a voice in shadow, they listened. That voice belonged to Sauron. He had come not in chains, but in honeyed words. Captured by force, yes, but within days he became advisor, then high priest. He whispered into the ears of kings, and the people listened. And in the end, when the last great king, Ar-Pharazôn, commanded his fleet to sail west to take what was forbidden, the sea rose. Not with waves. With judgment, the island of Númenor crumbled. The sky split. The ocean swallowed towers, harbours, statues. Mountains screamed as they sank, and in the silence that followed, nothing remained. Nothing but memory. Only a handful escaped, faithful hearts who had never turned. They sailed east in secret, carrying with them 7 stars, a white tree, and the last lights of Númenor. Among them was Elendil, and his sons, Isildur and Anarion. They would found new kingdoms in Middle-earth, Gondor, Arna, and try to remember what was lost, without repeating what had been done. But the shadow had already followed them. The storyteller's voice had grown softer with each word, until now it was barely there, like a thought or a sigh. Pride is heavy, he said. But fear sinks even the brightest stars. He turned his gaze back to you, not stern, but calm, as if the story was not told in anger, but in mourning. Even the greatest lights, if they burn too long, can blind, and sometimes the sea must reclaim what the land has forgotten. Outside you imagined the hush of the ocean, deep and eternal, not cruel, only complete. A sound older than all songs. You felt your body soften again, your mind drifting, as though carried by waves that needed no wind. There are still stars to follow, the voice said gently. Still trees that remember. Still hope. And then the fire faded to ash, and the island, for a while, was forgotten. The world was quiet again. The storm of waves and the fall of kingdoms had passed, and now your mind floated in stillness, like a leaf resting on a glassy river, untouched by wind. You stirred, just enough for the storyteller to know you were still with him, still listening somewhere beneath the surface of sleep. He did not speak at once. Instead, he placed a small silver leaf into the fire. It curled and crackled, sending a shimmer of pale smoke into the air, sweet and strange, like something that didn't belong entirely to this world. Tonight, he said, his voice slow and low, we leave behind the cities of stone. We leave behind the roaring sea and the weight of men. Tonight, we walk beneath golden trees in a forest that does not forget. He folded his hands and looked toward the window, though nothing lay beyond but night. There's a place where time is softer, where light lingers longer in the leaves. It is not hidden, and yet it cannot be found, unless it wishes to be. He smiled, not at you, not at himself, but at the memory. Lothlorien. Imagine a forest that glows even in the dark. The trees are tall and pale, their trunks smooth and silver grey. Their leaves shimmer gold even in winter, and when they fall, they do not wither. They drift slowly, silently, as though the very air mourns their descent. This forest is old, older than any kingdom of men, older than many of the stars we see now. It is watched over by those who do not forget the first age, and none among them remember more than Galadriel. She is not like the queens in songs. She wears no crown of iron or jewels. Her power is not in armies or spells. It is in her presence. When she looks at you, it is not with judgment, but with light, a light that sees through you, past all masks and all fears, into the place where your truest self waits. She is the Lady of the Wood, the keeper of the mirror, the one who remembers what it was like before the world broke, and who chose to remain when others left. Her voice is soft. When she speaks, the forest hushes to listen. The trees lean closer. Even the rivers slow, so that her words can float across the water without being lost. And yet, she is not unreachable. When the fellowship passed through her woods, weary, hunted, and afraid, she did not close her gates. She opened them, gave them shelter, gave them gifts, gave them choice, because that is her way, not to command, but to reveal. She showed each of them what could be, what might come, what they feared most, and then she asked them, "Will you go on?" Even the bravest among them trembled, but not Frodo. He offered her the ring, the one ring. He placed it in her hand, and for a moment the stars held their breath, because Galadriel, if she'd chosen to keep it, could have become a queen beyond imagining. Beautiful, terrible, wreathed in flame and ice and glory. But she did not. She let it go. "I passed the test," she said. "I will diminish, and go into the west, and remain Galadriel." The storyteller's voice trailed into silence, as if even he could not speak above that moment. You felt the fire beside you grow warmer, as though the story itself had wrapped you in a cloak of golden leaves. "There is a sadness in Lothlorien," he whispered, "not because it is dying, but because it knows it must one day fade." He leaned back in his chair. His eyes reflected not fire, but starlight. "The elves, they're not bound to this world as we are. Their gifts are long memory and slow loss. They hold beauty until it breaks, and then they carry the shards like song." The breeze outside stirred just once, like a breath drawn in sleep, and you let go again, your body sinking deeper, your thoughts wandering through forests where no footstep echoes, where light lives in the leaves, and time is nothing but a sigh. "Rest now," the storyteller said, as his voice faded. "For next, we must walk where the sun does not rise, and shadow has made its home." And with that, Lothlorien drifted into dream, and you followed, quiet, golden, and still. The room felt colder now, though the fire had not died. It was quiet cold, Not the kind that bites the skin, but the kind that settles slowly around you, like fog drifting in from forgotten valleys. You stirred only slightly, and the storyteller did not move, but his voice returned, softer than ever. Not all tales bring comfort, he whispered, but even the darkest places must be walked through, if we are to understand the light. He paused, as if waiting for the night itself to lean closer. I will take you now, to Mordor. There is a land where the sun does not truly rise, where the sky hangs heavy and grey, and even the wind feels dry and hollow. It lies far to the east, past broken hills and barren plains. No birds fly there, no trees grow. The rivers run black, and the very earth seems to groan beneath your feet. This is Mordor. It is not evil because it is empty. It is empty because it was emptied, drained of joy, stripped of song, carved into shadow by a will that could not be satisfied. Sauron once called it his home. Not his beginning, but his seat, his fortress, his mirror. He was not always as we know him. Long ago, before the world was shaped, before the seas shifted, he was a being of order, of structure, of design. He desired beauty through control, harmony through obedience. But desire, unchecked, becomes hunger, and hunger becomes shadow. He served a darker master once, Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, and from him he learned to twist the world, not by destroying it, but by reshaping it in his image. When Morgoth fell, Sauron remained, and from the ashes of defeat he rose again. He built Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, not as a throne, but as an eye. A place to watch everything, a place from which he could reach across lands and minds and wills. And at the centre of it all, he placed a piece of himself, the ring, forged in secret in the fires of Mount Doom, a mountain that bleeds fire and never sleeps. The ring was more than gold. It was Sauron's essence, his voice, his thought, his reach. To wear it was to carry him, to feel him, to be seen. And once it was made, all that followed became shadow. The land around Mordor blackened. Armies rose from the ground like smoke. Orcs twisted from other lives. Wraiths, once kings, now bound to a will not their own. The world shook under his gaze, and those who resisted bent or broke. But the ring was lost, and for a time the shadow weakened. Yet even without form, Sauron endured, because fear endures, doubt endures, and hope, once shaken, is slow to return. The storyteller's voice did not grow louder. If anything, it became softer, a thread of sound barely holding in the stillness. Do not fear the dark, he said gently. It is only the absence of light, not its end. He leaned closer, as if to share a secret. Sauron's power was never in fire. It was in convincing others they had no choice. But choice always remains. Even in Mordor there was choice. Frodo and Sam proved it. They walked into shadow, two small souls against a storm of despair. They were not warriors. They were not wise. They were not strong. But they kept walking, because light is not born in grand halls or high towers. It is born in quiet hearts. It is born in moments when everything says turn back, and someone chooses not to. You felt the fire flicker beside you, not fiercely, but steadily. Like a candle in a cave, the storyteller's voice was now like breath on your ear. Mordor is not just a place. It is a part of the world, and perhaps a part of us. But it does not win. Not if we remember the road out. He leaned back, his eyes no longer shadowed, but calm. Next, he said softly, we walk that road, all the way to the fire. And with that, the weight of darkness faded, and you slept, not afraid, not alone, but wrapped in a quiet knowing that even in the blackest lands, a single step forward can still matter. The room felt stiller than ever. No wind stirred the shutters. No embers snapped in the fire. The silence was complete, not empty, but expectant, as though even the night was waiting. You did not move, but the storyteller knew you were there, resting, listening. He breathed slowly, as if gathering a memory that had waited many years to be spoken aloud. "We have seen the shadow," he whispered. "Now let us walk the final road, not with fear, but with quiet feet and open hearts." He closed his eyes, and the tale unfolded. It began, as so many great things do, with something small. A hobbit, not tall, not strong, not trained for war or born to prophecy, just a quiet soul from the Shire, with kind hands and thoughtful eyes. His name was Frodo. He did not ask for the burden. The ring came to him not as a gift, but as a weight, something he could not ignore, even when it frightened him. Especially when it frightened him. He chose to carry it, not because he believed he could, but because no one else should. And beside him, always, was Sam. Samwise Gamgee, a gardener, a friend, a heart too big for his body. He followed Frodo not for glory, nor for duty, but because love cannot let someone walk alone. They crossed lands both beautiful and broken. They saw the White City from afar, watched the fall of stars in Rohan, drank from ancient springs in forgotten woods. But as they moved forward, the world grew quieter, the colour drained, and the air thickened with dread. And still they walked, not with armies, not with spells, only with each other. They climbed the black hills. They crawled across the ash. Their clothes wore thin. Their strength vanished. The ring grew heavier. Each step was harder than the last, not because of the path, but because of the voice within, whispering doubts, curling cold fingers around hope. Frodo grew weaker. Sam carried him. When Frodo could not speak, Sam sang. When Frodo could not walk, Sam bore him. Not because he thought he could finish the quest, but because friendship does not count the cost. It simply gives. And at last, they came to Mount Doom. The sky was choked with smoke. The air smelled of fire and endings. They stood on the edge of the world, at the lip of a furnace that had waited for ages. Frodo reached into his pocket, and then he could not let go. The ring had become a part of him, not just in flesh, but in mind, in soul. It whispered promises, showed visions, wrapped itself around his will. He claimed it, not out of greed, not out of hate, out of exhaustion. Even the strongest hearts can falter at the edge. But the story did not end there. Another had followed them, Gollum, broken and bound by the same hunger. He leapt, he fought, he bit, and in that madness the ring was taken, and it was lost, forever. Not by force, not by plan, but by chance, or fate, or perhaps something deeper still. And as the mountain roared, and the fire rose, Frodo and Sam held each other and waited for the end. But the end did not come. Not for them. The eagles came. The storyteller's voice softened again, like the hush of wings across water. They were carried back to the world. Not unchanged, no, never the same, but alive. And that was enough. They returned to the Shire, to the green hills and the round doors, to flowers blooming and bread baking and neighbours complaining about potatoes. But the Shire was not the same, and neither were they. Frodo smiled. He laughed. He planted trees. But some wounds, though healed, leave quiet echoes. He had saved the world, but the world he saved no longer held a place for the weight he carried. So one day He sailed westward into the light, and Sam stayed behind, with children, with stories, with the garden, because some journeys end in return, and some in peace. The storyteller grew quiet then. His eyes were soft, not with sorrow, but with reverence. They were never meant to be great, he said. They simply chose not to give up, and that choice changed everything. The fire had burned low, just enough to cast a golden line across the floor. You felt your eyes closing, your breath slowing, and before the last thought left your mind, you heard the storyteller speak once more. One final tale remains, he whispered. The war is over, but Middle-earth still breathes. And so you slept, not with heaviness, but with calm, carried by the memory of two small hobbits who walked into the dark and brought back the dawn. The fire had grown low again, no longer dancing, no longer bold, just a soft, steady glow, pulsing like the breath of the earth itself. You lay still, almost asleep, almost dreaming, and the storyteller, who had been quiet for longer than before, spoke again. "This is the last story," he said, not sadly, but with warmth. "But not the end." His voice felt softer now, like pages turning in an old book. He folded his hands in his lap, and for a moment said nothing at all. Then, when the war was over, when the great towers had fallen and the last shadows fled, Middle-earth did not rejoice with trumpet blasts or parades. It exhaled. A long, quiet exhale. Of sorrow. Of relief. Of everything held too long in silence. The world did not forget what it had been through, but it began, slowly, gently, to grow again. The white tree in Gondor bloomed once more. The king returned, Aragorn, crowned not just with gold, but with the trust of those who had watched him walk in silence. He ruled not with iron, but with wisdom. He walked the gardens with his children. He remembered the names of the fallen. He kept no throne too high. And Arwen, who had given up eternity, stood beside him, not with regret, but with love. In Rohan, the green fields welcomed song again. In the Shire, the seasons returned in their quiet rhythm, planting, gathering, feasting. New hobbit holes were dug, new stories were told. Some even remembered a gardener named Samwise, who became mayor, and who planted trees that grew taller than any in living memory. And yet, not everyone stayed. The elves began to leave, in ships that whispered through mist, bound westward toward shores unseen. Galadriel was among them, Elrond too. Even Gandalf, the grey pilgrim, took his rest. They did not leave because they were tired. They left because the time had come. Their part in the song was finished. Their light would fade if it stayed too long, but they did not take magic with them. They left it behind, not in spells, not in swords, but in stories, in memories, in the way a fire sounds on a quiet night, in the way stars fall through trees when no one is watching. Middle-earth continued, quietly. The people rebuilt, not to forget, but to live. For that is what victory truly means. Not the ending of war, but the return of gardens, laughter, small kindnesses, a world where people can choose again. The storyteller looked at you now, really looked. "And so here we are," he said, "at the end, but also at the beginning." He smiled, not wide, not grand, just a soft smile, like a candle flickering at dawn. Middle-earth never really ends, not while someone remembers it, not while stories are told. He reached beside his chair and placed something in your hand. It was only a small acorn, but somehow it felt like more. "You've walked far," he whispered. "Now rest. And when you wake, plant this. Outside, a breeze stirred, not cold, not strange, just gentle. The fire faded, not into dark, but into light. And as sleep took you fully, deeper than before, you dreamed not of war, nor shadow, nor sorrow, but of green hills, round doors, singing trees, and the promise that even the smallest voice can keep a world alive. Thank you for walking with me through Middle-earth. Rest well, dream deeply. The story waits, should you ever return.